making sure we're good. You know what I'm saying? It's just making sure we are unlocking our unlimited potential so we could rebuild what was stripped and taken from us and continues to be taken from us in terms of our freedom and self-determination. So it's just all about organizing, strategizing, and taking that back and then using it to rebuild our nation. So that's what it means to me, brother.
I got you. I feel you. I know that just from previous discussions where we've talked about like the status of Black power and particularly, just talking for a minute at the federal level, at the congressional level, this issue of collective decision making, like the ways that we come together to impact policy collectively. I know that that's an area where we feel like there's some development that we still need in terms of like setting a Black agenda, right? And then two, the ways that we're able to move it through the process. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what's your vision for the ways that we can strengthen the way that we make Black power a reality, particularly at the level that you're at? And then, we could talk about any other thoughts about like local level and all that. But,
oh, no.
I know.
No, 100%. So whether you are a Black grassroots organization, a legacy civil rights organization, a new civil rights organization, a person that deals with Black wealth, the Black church, what have you, you should be reaching out to every member of Congress on a consistent basis to engage and build a relationship with them. So that member of Congress ensures that they are clear on Black issues and they know that we are organized and ready to hold them accountable towards meeting the needs of our community. So as a newly elected member of Congress, I expect to get calls from all of these groups, all of these organizations, emails wanting to meet with me, wanting to engage with me, wanting to build a relationship with me. So I make sure that I act in the best interest of Black people while I'm in Congress. Now, notice I didn't say these orgs and these groups and these individuals should be meeting with the CBC. It's not just the CBC. It's every member of Congress needs to be engaged with us, and we need to force them to be engaged with us. Absolutely, the CBC should be and become the tip of that spear, if you will, because the CBC exists not just to be the conscience of the Congress, but to act in the best interest of Black people across this country. So definitely, it needs to be an inside-outside approach. The CBC, elected congressional members with civil rights organizations, new and legacy, the grassroots, Black wealth, Black excellence in all its forms. We need to be working together to come up with policy agendas and then leveraging our votes and our relationships in Congress and the White House to make sure our policy is implemented and executed. That's how I see that happening. And I see an opportunity there through coalition building to make this happen. So it's an exciting time to be here to help be a part of building that out. And it's going to take all of us. It's going to take everyone. I know coalitions are hard to build because people don't always agree, and we don't have to agree on 100% of the things. We don't have to always play nice in the sandbox. But we got to be respectful. We got to be clear on what our priorities are, and we got to execute them together. Because I've seen other groups wield tremendous power in Congress by bringing bills to the floor for a vote, by taking bills away that they didn't like. Leadership is responding to other groups, but not responding to us in the way we need them to, and we need to change that.
I feel you. Let's go off that a little bit. Of the notion of this coalition building, right? Because you got folks that say, you know what, this whole process is not one that lets us really manifest Black power, because when we're in this setting, talking about the federal level, we're relying on these coalitions. We're relying on some folks that are always letting us down. Even look at this battle that we're in right now for voting, right? We know what the Republicans are doing, but it's two Democrats, really more than two, but two in particular that are holding up progress. And there's other issues like that where people say, you know what, we're trying to advance Black power. We're trying to build coalitions, but the folks we in coalition with so often let us down and take us for granted. Like you got this whole, and I know you've heard it before, like we can't get what we want through this process because it's a process that's inherently anti-us, and that folks in our coalition are just as unreliable as some of those white moderates that Dr. King talked about in Letter from Birmingham Jail. Like, what's your response? And we do this work, right? I'm all in terms of like the ways that we use our electoral power. But this is something that I hear a lot, right? Even when we do our work in the streets, like what's your response to this notion of trying to build Black power through a system that at its roots, its origins was anti-Black, is not a way that's going to bear fruit? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so just to clarify, when I say coalition, I'm talking initially about Black coalition. So we can't be, in my opinion, we can be in coalition with others, but we need to make sure we're in coalition with each other first. And that's what I believe this is an opportunity for us to strengthen our coalitions with each other. As we move in coalition with each other, then we can be more influential as we engage with members of Congress, and particularly as we engage with members of the CBC. Because at the end of the day, nothing can pass the House without the CBC support. No legislation. If the CBC decides we are not going to vote for this, it will not pass the House. That is power. Currently, we don't always move in that way. And I believe, and I'm having conversations with members of the CBC right now, that we need to begin to move in that way more often. How does every piece of legislation dramatically impact in a positive way the Black community? Explain it to me. Tell me how this piece of legislation helps us. And then maybe we'll vote for it. And if it doesn't, okay, you want me to vote for that? I need this to pass, whether it's HR 40 or something else. So the CBC, we as CBC members, we have an incredible opportunity because of our numbers and our strength and our history to wield power in a way to transform how Congress works because of our votes. It can pass without us, right? So that's what I mean. Let's build Black coalition, a strong Black coalition across the country and across the world, and engage with CBC members in Congress to wield this power in a way that benefits us, and engage with the White House in a way so they know that we are present and engaged about it, and that any policy that they try to put forth, if it doesn't impact our community, we're not supporting it. And it's going to take all of us to wield that kind of power. And everything I'm describing in Congress can happen on the state level, can happen on the county level, can happen on the city level. It's the same idea. But it's all about being organized and strategic and together, as you know.
Definitely. And just to reinforce what you're saying, people hear you say something like, oh, the CBC, nothing can pass, the CBC doesn't support it. Just this recent battle is an example, not just the CBC in this case, but the Progressive Caucus. This recent battle over the past couple of weeks over infrastructure and Build Back Better, I think, demonstrates that. Those who are listening probably know that you had this debate recently over whether or not they were going to vote on the infrastructure bill, or whether we're going to consider link it to the infrastructure Build Back Better reconciliation process. And the Progressive Caucus held its ground and said, no, if you try to vote on infrastructure, you are not going to have the votes because we're not going for it. And that bloc was able to make sure that we're able to continue to have discussions on Build Back Better. The CBC could do similar actions on not just that bill, but a range of other bills, right, if it acts as a bloc.
And if the CBC knows that the Black community outside of Congress has our backs,
that's right.
So it's not just send us to office. Okay, go do your job, go work for us. It's like we're sending you to office and we got your back and we're holding you down. Right. That is empowering, because with that now we feel more emboldened to be more, not radical, but strategic in how we engage with leadership in Congress to make sure our priorities remain there or at the top of the agenda. It's all of us, man. You know what I'm saying? It's inside, outside, outside, inside.
Right. And that piece about having their back is important from a couple of perspectives, because there's knowing that the community has your back in the sense of like, we're with you on this issue. Like we, this community, like you were talking, like collective self-determination. We came up with this agenda. We want you to implement this. There's that part of having your back. But the other part of having their back is where it gets tricky, right? It's because there's a financial aspect to this, right? And sometimes when folks, and I'm not saying this about the CBC, but just elected officials in general, we all know the deal. Heck, it's part of the reason why the For the People Act and now the Freedom Vote Act, part of it included this aspect of like taking money out of politics, campaign finance reform. It's because at the end of the day, elected officials, they're responsive to polls and who set the agenda and who votes. But it's also sometimes about who's funding. One of the things I said years ago, we tried to start a third party in Alabama. And one of the lessons that I learned from it or was reinforced in it is that independent politics requires independent money, right? You got to have that financial support to be able to engage in a truly independent way. And so when you think about this aspect of like Black power and the ways that we build a caucus and we create an agenda, what are your thoughts on that connection between the economic aspect of having that power and being able to fully support the implementation of our Black agenda without having to be concerned about who's donating to which candidates and all that? You feel me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a great point. The Black agenda and Black coalition building has to be funded by Black people, in my opinion. And thank God we have Black people with capital who can fund it. There are Black billionaires in this country and around the world. There are many Black people with hundreds of millions of dollars in resources and assets. It is those people who should be funding the Black agenda and Black coalition building, because if they aren't, then it's going to be watered down by funding that comes from outside of our community, whether it's from other racial, ethnic or ethnic groups, fossil fuel industry or pharmaceutical companies or weapons manufacturers. Individual campaigns have to be funded, like my own, as well as initiatives like whether it's the movement for Black Lives Matter, the CBC, Black Voters Matter, all of it. People have to try to earn a living and survive and continue to do the work. But our community has trillions of dollars in spending assets and that we spend every year. And the Democratic Party raises hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. So there's absolutely a financial aspect of it, and it has to be funded. The other aspect of getting our backs is this. We are going to, at some point, come across challenging other groups directly by voting for or against something that they don't really like. And those groups will attack us, both in terms of our district office, our national office, and publicly. And we need to know that we have a Black infrastructure and army ready to respond to that. I've experienced that personally, and I know many of my colleagues have. So that's another aspect of getting our backs as well.
Great. No, I'm with you. Want to be respectful of your time. Talk about how you got involved in all this. We talked about what Black power means to you. Sometimes the most difficult of these three questions is the next one. How do we know that we're getting there? How do we know that we're building Black power? How do we know that we're getting closer to it? What does success look like?
Yeah. So great question. I think the fact that I'm speaking to you right now is an example of us getting closer to where we need to be. If I wasn't ran for office, if I wasn't able to win with overwhelming Black support, I don't know if you and I would ever have connected, right? So that's one example. Another example is, people like Congresswoman Presley and Congresswoman Bush and Congresswoman Omar and others like them winning elected office both in Congress and across the country. I mean, those are real proof of concept examples of how we're getting closer. The fact that now in Congress, we are all directly engaged, not just with each other, but with the White House and